This morning we're going to be talking about our theme is Behold our King. We've been looking at various traits and features of Christ as our King and being part of His kingdom and what that involves and entails in our lives. Now we've pointed out the challenge to thinking about Jesus as our King. Mainly this cuts against our cultural identity. As Americans, we are averse to any notion of a king or a monarchy. After all, our nation was born out of revolution against a monarch in England. Kings are often viewed as self-serving and tyrants, and they are often just that. They may oppress their citizens to maintain power. And that certainly was true in Jesus' day. When the people of Jesus' day thought of tyrants, they could have put together quite a list. If we think about the Middle East in that period of time, it was ruled by kings and various warlords. Over all of it, though, was the Roman emperor. The Roman emperor ruled over those territorial rulers. Israel, of course, hoped for the day when their king would come and a new revolution would begin, that they could regain their independence and freedom from the oppressive rule of Rome. And so when it was that Jesus came and they began seeing the miracles that He performed, the power that He possessed, the interest, curiosity, fame that He gained, many were ready to make Him their king. On one occasion in John chapter 6, that's exactly what they tried to do. But for some strange and unusual reason, Jesus quickly left the scene. Jesus had no interest in becoming their king in the way they were thinking. In the history of the kings of the earth, Jesus stands out as unique. The world has never known a sovereign like Him before or since. And this is true for one reason. This is true because of love. Our King possesses love, a love unlike this world has ever known before or since or ever will in the future. This is what makes Jesus unique as our King. There's any number of points in the ministry of Jesus that we could look to that highlight the self-giving love of Jesus. When we think of Him serving the least among Him of that day and age, we see His love, His compassion for those who were sick as He would bring them healing. I'd like to go to Mark chapter 10, though, this morning and focus in on a conversation that Jesus had with His apostles. In this conversation, there are two things really that happen. Number one, you see the perspective of humans as it relates to their understanding of power. And that is contrasted, secondly, by the things that Jesus has to say about His power and how power would be redefined in His kingdom. So to begin with, we find in this conversation, and we're going to work our way through it this morning, we find that as humans, we are self-serving. Nearly at every turn, we are self-serving. We are self-interested. We very rarely put the needs of others before our own, let alone concern ourselves with what our King would want and even demand in our lives. On this occasion in Mark chapter 10, we find that Jesus and the apostles had been traveling. And there's something that stands out that took place just before this conversation, perhaps that influenced the timing of it even. And that is, of course, that Jesus for the third time tells the disciples that He's going to go to Jerusalem. He's going to give Himself over to the rulers. He's going to die and be raised the third day. Now you can go back to the very first time Jesus told them that, when he was in Caesarea Philippi, and the apostles about lost their minds. He was supposed to be their king. How could a king go, give himself over to be arrested, and then die? Far be it from me, Lord. That was Peter's response. Well, now 3 times Jesus had told them about this, and I doubt very seriously that they had even begun to grasp what that meant, why that had to happen, and the both personal and far-reaching implication of his death and resurrection. From what we see from the very first time Jesus told them that, they were trying to figure out how they could prevent it from happening. As far as they were concerned, their hopes and dreams and aspirations were crumbling right in front of them. And so Peter and John, James and John, James and John take the opportunity to make some demands of Jesus. In Mark 10 and verses 35 to 37, they say, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." Now, a lot of Bibles that have headings and a lot of commentators have described this as the request of James and John. I'll suggest to you this was not a request. I don't think for a minute this was a request. This was a demand. And there is a difference between a request and a demand. Again, when you put this in context to what's going on, as they see their hopes and dreams slipping away, have they cornered him? Have they cornered Jesus? I think they've cornered him. "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." What kind of a thing to say is that? We often will talk about the relationship between a master and the disciple, the dynamic that's involved there. This is not how disciples speak to their master. "We want you to give us whatever we want." Now, that might be how a young child talks to their parents, but that certainly is not how the King of Kings is to be spoken to. It seems to me, at least, that Jesus just humors them. "Well, what do you want me to do for you?" Let's hear it. Out with it already. "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." Can you see how self-serving James and John were? Now they're thinking about power, position, and all that would come with that. And thinking about kingdom. Oh, finally it was going to be their turn. It was going to be their turn to put the rest of the world in its place. And yes, Jesus, you're leading the way, but we're going to be at your left and right hand. There will be no one closer to you and to your power than us. You imagine them envisioning the kind of life they would have with such power. That's what they want. That's what they covet. And now they've got Jesus in a place where they think he's got to give us what we want. Well, what if he doesn't give them what they want? What do you do when you corner someone? You're using power to leverage, aren't you? Trying to leverage something out of Jesus. Well, what if He doesn't give us what we want? Well, maybe we'll go home. He keeps talking about this business of going back to Jerusalem and giving Himself over and dying. Maybe we'll just go home. Have your kingdom without us. No one had been more committed and sacrificial than these two men and their colleagues, but have your kingdom without us. Maybe we'll just go home. He's got to give us what we want. Is that how you approach Jesus? Now, we look at this text and again, we're just amazed at how such a demand could be made because we would never do something like that. But how often do we treat Jesus like that? You ever make a demand of Him? Have you ever tried to leverage your way with Him? When you come into conflict with something that He said that you don't like, that's what James and John had come in conflict with. He told them something they didn't want to hear. Has Jesus ever told you something you didn't want to hear? Well, of course. Of course, we've all had Jesus tell us things that we didn't want to hear. Because like we were even talking about this morning, we're sinful. And no one wants to be called out for it. Instead, we want to try to leverage, justify, rationalize. Put Him in a corner where He's got to give in to our demands. That's a fool's errand. That's a fool's errand. You can't leverage yourself with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Not then, and certainly not now. When Jesus tells us to repent or ruin, that's what He means. When He tells us to deny ourselves and follow Him, that's what He means. I mean, you go through and you can read the Sermon on the Mount. Verse after verse, saying after saying, challenged at every turn. He challenges us deeply in our hearts, deeply in our character. He demands that we reflect on who we are, what we've become, so that we can change and follow Him. Men have responded violently. Men have responded violently to the things that Jesus has spoken. Make no mistake about it. As long as we are self-serving, as long as we're trying to leverage power, but we'll never be able to receive Jesus. We'll never be able to become part of His kingdom. We'll remain not at His left and right hand, but on the outside. Secondly, though, what we find in this conversation is that Jesus is self-giving. He's the opposite. He's the opposite of us. He's the opposite of James and John. Do you remember on one occasion where Jesus made the contrast very clear? He says, I am from above, you are from below. And as long as we just look at Jesus like He's one of us, we'll never see Him for who He is. He goes on and says, you don't know what you're asking. I wonder if He'd respond the same way to us. We think we've got Him where we want Him. We think we've got it all worked out, all figured out. And He'd tell us, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? Or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? They said to Him, we are able. Jesus said to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to grant, but is for those to whom it has been prepared. Now, what is this talk about drinking the cup and being baptized like Him? As is often the case, Jesus sometimes can be vague, encoded, often from our perspective. These are expressions that were used to discuss suffering. Suffering. Are you able to suffer what I'm going to suffer? Oh, we're able. It just shows you. It shows you how far gone James and John were in their thinking. They don't even understand. They don't have the first inkling about what it means that Jesus has to go to Jerusalem and die. Oh, yeah, we can do it. Jesus says, well, you will suffer. You will suffer. But not like me. Jesus would have to go through His death alone, because He alone could satisfy the need of our sins at the cross. But He says, as far as this sitting on my left and right hand, it's not for me to grant. He's not just handing out position in His kingdom. And then He goes on further. Now, by the time He goes on further, this conversation between Jesus, James, and John was heard by the other apostles. Now, you can imagine, again, this is why I would suggest to you that James and John weren't the only ones who were self-serving. They weren't the only ones out for power. They weren't the only ones thinking like this. The others were as well. They began to get upset that James and John got Him cornered before they had the opportunity to. They got to Him first. Now there's fighting. There's fighting among them. Isn't that what happens to power-hungry people? They argue and fight, divide into chaos. So Jesus has something to say for all of them to hear. You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. And their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many. Who is Jesus talking about? You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Who are the Gentiles? Who is He talking about? Who would have come to mind? Tiberius? Tiberius was the emperor of Rome. The Jews knew full well about what it meant to have someone lord over them. It was violent, tyrannical. You and I cannot begin to imagine the kind of pressure and stress that those people lived under every day. There are people in other places in the world who can understand and relate to that kind of pressure, but not us. Not us, because in this comparison, we are the Romans. He says they lord it over. But that's not how power is going to be used in the kingdom. Jesus begins to redefine power. He is not self-serving. He is self-giving. And that's what his death is all about. That's why Jesus had been telling them he was going to die. Why he had to die. He was going to give his life as a ransom for many. Through his blood, he was going to pay the price that he alone could pay. His death having far-reaching consequence. He surrendered heaven and came to earth. I mean, this is the language that is used. How his death and resurrection are remembered. He surrenders heaven. He comes to earth. He lives as a poor servant. Ultimately, he laid down his life to save a world that had rejected him. And it is through that self-giving love, he says, that he would draw the world to himself. Self-giving love is far more powerful than a tyrant. And so it is Jesus seeks to change us through self-giving love. Not just in drawing us to him, but in making us the kind of people of his kingdom that we need to be. We find that we must become self-giving. Yes, the apostles had a long way to go, didn't they? Now, they were consumed with pride and self-interest. So too are we. We are often consumed by pride and self-interest, yet Jesus does not give up on us. He pleads with us to look to him, to look to his cross, so that we might follow in his steps. No, Jesus does not see us for what we are. He knew that James and John and the rest were self-interested. He knew that. But what he also knew is what those men could become. Those men could change drastically, and they did. And so too can we. That's what this text is about. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant. You want to be part of the kingdom, you have to become a servant. Because the king is a servant king. He died for the world, gave his life a ransom for many. You want to be first, you must become the slave of all. I mean, we are always trying to get ourselves to the front of the line, aren't we? We're always trying to get ahead in life. And there's all kinds of rationale and justification that we use in the process. I mean, we're trying to do it for the betterment of our families or whatever it is, but we're always trying to get ahead. Jesus takes this mentality that is common to man and turns it on its head. He says, no, this paradox, if you want to be great, you've got to be small. If you want to be first, you've got to be last. If you want power, you've got to serve. Well, serve who? Serve the least among you. Serve the widows and the orphans. Serve the ones who can't repay you. Serve the ones who all they can give is a thank you. Or even serve those perhaps who wouldn't thank you. Don't let their left hand know what their right hand's doing. Don't alert the marching band when you do a good deed. Service, becoming self-giving as Jesus was. Jesus asks of us only to do what he himself did. He was great, yet he served the least. He was remembered by Paul as someone who was rich but became poor. All through sacrifice. I put this quote in the article that I wrote for today from the late Fulton Sheen. I'll share it with you at this point. He says that the rain cannot save itself if it is to bud the greenery. A mother cannot save herself if she is to save her child. A soldier cannot save himself if he is to save his country. Greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. If you want to be like Jesus, you have to become self-giving. So we must truly behold our King. This is the way to melt our pride and to soften our hearts. Only by looking to the cross of our King, the place where He died as a ransom for many, will power and greatness begin to be redefined in us. If His cross has begun to melt your pride and soften your heart, you can receive His forgiveness, be welcomed into His kingdom, and begin your life of service today. If you'd come forward and make your request known as we stand and sing.